dedicating the shir, dedicating the week of learning, mmemoration of the yahrzeit of Ira's mother, Frieda Grossman, Frieda Bas Shmuel Zechron Levrach. We open on the merits of our Talmud Torah. Shem will have an aliyah and the family in Necham. We don't yet have a Talmud Torah sponsor for the month of Av. All right, so with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Chaf Gimel 23. We are picking up on Chaf Beis and with Beis. We have a lot to do today. But we're actually just going to jump back just a little bit. I know we can't really afford to jump back all that much, considering how much we left off with. But let's pick up with once again, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, which is 14 lines down from the top. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Very quickly, we did this case yesterday. Shnaim Omrim meis, ushnaim omrim lo meis. Two Eidim say the husband died, two say he didn't die. Harezia lo tinase, ve'emli says lo tete, she shouldn't remarry, but if she did remarry, she does not have to leave the second husband. Shnaim omrim niskarsha, shnaim omrim lo niskarsha. Two witnesses say that she was divorced, two witnesses say she wasn't divorced. Harezia lo tinase, she should not remarry. Ve'emli says tete. And if she does remarry, then halacha l'maisa, she should leave husband number two. So this is where we left off. I asks the Gemara, Maishna Reisha, Maishna Seifa. I will say, now both of these cases seem to be the same, right? They're the same case. What's the same case? They're both cases of what? 2 versus 2. In case 1, 2 witnesses say that her husband died, 2 witnesses say that her husband didn't die. In that case, the halacha is, she shouldn't get remarried, but if she does, she doesn't have to leave husband number 2. Case number 2, 2 witnesses say she got divorced, 2 witnesses say she didn't get divorced, shouldn't get remarried, but in that case, if she does have to leave husband number 2. So asks the Gemara, why the difference between the two cases? Amar Abaye says, Tirgma be'ed echad. Oh, interesting. Abaye says, how do you set up the case? We're not talking about a case of 2 versus 2, but rather what? Halacha l'maisa, we're talking about a situation of an eid echad. And therefore says the Gemara, listen to this. Eid echad omer meis, heminu rabbanik beitrei. I will say, now we make sense. Because remember again, when an eid echad, going back to our Yavamis days, when an eid echad says that the husband died, ultimately again he is believed. Not only is he believed, but an eid echad in the realm of saying that a husband died has the power of 2 eidim. Ukidu'ula da amru ula, kamakum sheminu Torah eid echad, hare kan shnayim. When Ula says, whenever the Torah believed in eid echad, an eid echad has the power of 2 witnesses. And therefore, watch this, Rabosai. V'haydeka amar lo meis havel echad ve'in devarav shel echad v'makom shnayim. Listen to this. Sefer Rabosai, the Gemara says like this. In fact, the way the case is Abaye, the way the case is going to work out is like this. It's really an eid echad comes along and says, husband died. Rachel, your husband Ruvain died. Okay, what happens when an eid echad comes along and says that a husband died? What's the halacha? He's believed, and he's treated as if he is 2 witnesses. So then what happens? Then another eid comes along and says, no, Ruvain didn't die. So I'll say, interestingly enough, how do we view that second eid echad? Exactly as that, as an eid echad. And so it turns out that halacha l'maisa, it's really an eid echad against, so to speak, 2 witnesses. If that's the case, the Gemara says, Ihachi, afil lechatchila nami. If that's the case, then why don't we allow it? Remember again, what did the Brisa say? Lechatchila, she shouldn't get remarried. But in that case, if she did get remarried, we wouldn't make her leave the second husband. But if it's as you just set up, then halacha l'maisa, why can't she get remarried lechatchila? This is incredible. Mishum de Rabbi Asi, haser mimcha akshus peh, v'lozus svasayim harcheik mimecha. So we'll say, quoting over here the pasuk from Mishlei, literally again, remove from yourself the crookedness of the mouth, v'lozus svasayim, and the slander of the lips, move away from yourself. I will say, so what's interesting about this case is like this. So the Gemara says, you're right, me'ikar adin, the way we just set it up according to Abaye, she should be able to get married lechatchila. But here's the issue. You have opposing testimony. You do have opposing testimony. And as much as that opposing testimony, halacha l'maisa, is not necessarily halachically relevant, we do take it into account. So the lechatchila we tell her, you know what? Don't get married until we go ahead and we clarify this a little bit. But if she did, ex post facto, ultimately, again, she doesn't have to leave. Rava Amar Nabo said, now you understand the distinction between the case of where you have Eidos when he died versus Eidos when she was divorced. Weiter, another opinion. Rava Amar, the Olam Treyu Trey. Rava says, at the end of the day, thank you, I'm sorry. Seifa, Eid Echad Omer Niskarsha, the Eid Echad Omer Lo Niskarsha. Here it is. We'll say, the Seifa, the second case of the Brisa, where you have an Eid Echad saying, right, first Eid says she got divorced. Second Eid says she got divorced. So Tarvayu Be'eshes Ish Kamesadi. And I will say, interestingly enough, they are both testifying about a woman who is married. So the only shaila is she still married or is she no longer married? V'haidu Kamran is Garsha, and the one who said that she was divorced, Havi Lechad, Vein Dvarav Shel Echad B'makom Shnayim. So I will say, this is what's interesting. In that case, it's such a fascinating cheshbon. When the Eidim are arguing, is she divorced, is she not divorced? What do they both agree on? What do they both agree on? That she was an Eishes Ish. So you have two witnesses certifying the fact that she was an Eishes Ish, and now an Eid Echad saying that she was divorced. Okay, so I'll say, so what does that leave you with? That leaves you with an Eishes Ish. And therefore, again, she has no right lechatchila to get married. And even b'diavad, if she does get married, we would make her leave second husband. Incredible. Rava Amar Rava says, the Olam Treyu training. Rava says, no, I don't like that. Abai, I don't like that. We're going, it's as the Bryce has said, it's two witnesses versus two witnesses. And ultimately, again, Rabbi Yochanan accepted the position of Rabbi Menachem Bar Yossi, who Rabbi Yossi was quoted in yesterday's daf. Quoting yesterday, who made the distinction between when she remarries before the witnesses or after the witnesses. And he agreed with Rabbi Menachem Bar Yossi in the case of divorce, but not in the case of death. My time, what's the reason? Very simply, Misa ein yechola mechashto. In a case of death, ultimately, again, she cannot contradict the husband, so to speak, right? But in the case of gerushin, she can. But will a woman go ahead and contradict her husband regarding divorce? What does that mean? We'll say this is the position of Hamnuna, which is going to come up a couple of times throughout this daf, which is incredible. Rav Hamnuna says a woman would never be so brazen to tell her husband that he divorced her. No, let me say it differently. A woman would never be so brazen to say to her husband in his presence that he divorced her if he had in fact not divorced her. Which will say, there's a logic. In other words, to tell your spouse, oh yeah, you divorced me, when you know that's not true, that level of azus, that level of brazenness, a person would not exhibit. And therefore, again, halacha l'maaseh, if a woman does tell her husband that you divorced me, we believe her. To which the Gemara says, when is that true? That's when there's no eidos, right? That's when she's not bolstered by eidim. However, again, the Gemara says, aval heicha diika eidim d'kamasayle mi'iza u'mi'iza. But I will say, when she does have supporting testimony, then einach inami, she would be tempted to lie, right? Even a bold-faced lie in the presence of her husband, because at the end of the day, halacha l'maisa, she has testimony, or she has witnesses to back her up. Ravasi says, Kigon the army eidim achshav meis achshav girsha. Ravasi has a different interpretation of the brisa. What's the case of the brisa? The eidim come along and say their eidos is right now your husband just died, right? Or right now your husband just divorced her. So now watch this. Misa leka levrura. So we'll say in the case of death, presumably the eidim are saying the husband died at some faraway location that they cannot presently corroborate. However, gerushin ika leborara. In the case of gerushin, if the eidim are claiming, Rachel, your husband Ruvain just divorced you now, that you can clarify. How can you clarify? Da'amrin Allah im isa dahachi hava achsi lo giteich. If your husband just divorced you, show us your get. Good. So again, all of this, three different interpretations, all really focused on the same idea, which is halacha l'mayis. You have a brisa. The brisa says, again, seems to set up two parallel cases, right? Two eidim versus two eidim. First case is a case of death. Second case is a case of gerushin. In the case of death, lechatchila, she shouldn't get remarried b'diavad. If she did, she doesn't have to leave her second husband. In the second case, in the case of divorce, lechatchila, she shouldn't get remarried. If she did, she does have to leave her second husband. And all the Gemara was just giving was different interpretations as to how we make a chilik, how we make a distinction between death and divorce. Beautiful. Tan Rabbanon. Shnaim omrim niskacho, shnaim omrim lo niskacho. Interesting case. Two witnesses say, Rachel, you are mikudeshes, right? You were niskadsha. You had kiddushin with Ruvain, and 2 witnesses say she did not have kiddushin. What's the halacha? Harezu lo tinase. She should not get married. Ve'imnises lo teitze. I will say now what that means is she should not get married to someone else, right? She should not get married to someone else, right? Harezu right tinase. Ve'imnises lo teitze. But ultimately, again, if she did, she doesn't have to leave. She doesn't have to leave her husband. Shnaim omrim niskarsha, shnaim lo niskarsha. Okay, a parallel case. 2 witnesses say, Rachel, you got divorced from Ruvain. 2 witnesses say, Rachel, you didn't get divorced from Ruvain. Harezo lo tinase, she should not get remarried. Ve'imnises teitze. But in that case, she should go ahead and leave second husband. Leave second husband. Okay, so I'll say, let's analyze. Top of Chaf Gimel. So we're stuck with the same problem. So the same problem. Again, I will say 2 cases. Case number 1, 2 witnesses say, Rachel, you had kiddushin with Ruvain. 2 witnesses say, Rachel, you didn't have kiddushin with Ruvain. What's the halacha there? She should not marry someone else, but if she did, what's the halacha? She doesn't have to leave husband. She doesn't have to leave. We'll call him husband number 2. We'll call him Shimon. Right? Case number 2, Rachel, you did get divorced from Ruvain. 2 witnesses, Rachel, you didn't get divorced from Ruvain. She should not marry someone else, but if she did, what's the halacha? She has to leave that second husband. So I asked the Gemara, why do you distinguish between these cases? Interesting. Abaye says, what's the case? Eid echad. It's 1 witness who is testifying. So the Gemara says, listen to this. Eid echad omer niskatsha ve'echad omer niskatsha tarvai b'pnuya kamesadi v'hai dekamer niskatsha havi lechad ve'in devara shel echad b'makom shnayim. Now listen, this is great. So listen to this. Abaye l'shitaso. Abaye says, no. It's not cases of 2 witnesses versus 2 witnesses, but rather what is it? It's 1 witness. Now listen, now watch this. Here's the case. 1 witness comes along and says, Rachel, you received kiddushin from Ruvain. 1 witness says, that's what? No, you didn't. Then I will say, what do both witnesses agree on? What do they both agree on? That she was single. Right? Interesting. So what they both agree on was that she was single, that there was a previously established state of single-kite, right? So she was single. Now we'll say, so now what happens? An Eid Echad comes along and says that she received Kiddushin. Okay, so we'll say, what's the status of an Eid Echad in the face of 2 witnesses who say that she was single? Meaningless. And therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, although we would tell her, l'chatchila, don't get remarried until we figure this out, b'diavad, if she did, we would not make her leave her husband. However, seifa, Eid echad omer niskarsha ve'eid echad omer niskarsha, Rabbi say in the seifa case, 1 witness says that she was divorced, 1 witness says that she wasn't divorced. So we'll say in this case, what's the halacha? Tarvayu be'eshes ish kamesadi. Rabbi say, what do the 2 witnesses agree on? What do they agree on? That she was married. So you have 2 witnesses saying that she was an eshes ish, and therefore what? I have 1 witness saying that she was divorced, and therefore one witness does not carry any weight in the face of 2, and therefore her status is an eshes ish, and therefore alocha l'maisa, even if she remarries, we would make her leave husband number 2. Incredible. Incredible. That's Abaye. Next. Rav says, no, I don't like it. Li'olam treyu trey. In reality, it's 2 witnesses versus 2 witnesses. Ve'efoch. And I think you have to go ahead and actually switch to halachas. Meaning what? Shnaim, here we go. Shnaim omrim ra'inuha shenis katsha, u'shnaim omrim lo ra'inuha shenis katsha, harezu lo tinase. So this is interesting. Rashi has a different nuance. What's the case? 2 witnesses say, Rachel, we saw you receive kiddushin from Ruvain. And 2 witnesses say, Rachel, we did not see you receive kiddushin from Ruvain. What's halacha? Harezu lo tinase. Ideally, she shouldn't get remarried, or she shouldn't get married to, right? She shouldn't get married to another person. So we clarify this. V'mises teitze. But if she did get remarried, she has to leave husband number 2. So the Gemara says, Pshiter. Now understand that. Listen to the different claims over here. 2 witnesses say, Rachel, we saw you receive kiddushin from Reuben. You're a married woman. What did the other 2 witnesses say? We didn't see anything. So the Gemara says, Pshita, lo ra'inua inoraya. I will say, saying you didn't see something is not edus. Is not edus. Right? I will say, imagine two witnesses show up amazing. We saw Reuven kill Shimon. Another two witnesses show up and say, well, we didn't see anything. Okay, right, shkoyach, right? You didn't see anything. Most of the world didn't see it. That's not edus. So therefore, I will say, if that's how you're setting up this case, then essentially really all you have is what? One set of witnesses, right? Two witnesses. And those two witnesses say that what? That Rachel received Kiddushin from Reuven. So now if Rachel goes and receives Kiddushin from Shimon, of course she has to leave Shimon. I will say this is incredible. Lo tzricha, here we go. The dari b'chatzar echad. No. The Eidim who say we didn't see anything, they live in the same chatzar, in the same courtyard, as Rachel and Reuven, or one of the parties, I should say at least. Listen to this. Ma'oden, what would you have thought? Im isa dinis kacha kala islay. You would have thought like this. If Rachel really was mikudeshes to Reuven, they would have heard of kala islay. Kala islay means what? People hear about it. It would have been a l'chaim, avar, some streamers on the door, whatever it is. A big mazel tov sign. People have kiddushin. There's a call. And the fact that they lived in the same chatzor, they never heard about this. It must be that what? So in other words, that's what it means. When the Eidim show up and they say, we didn't see Rachel receive Kiddushin from Reuven, what they're saying is, we live in the same chatzor as these people. And if something would have happened, we would have heard about it. Kamash Malon, da'avdi inshi, demekadshe bitsina. So I'll say, what do you see from here? You see from here that halacha l'maisa, there are people who do Kiddushin quietly. Right? There are people ultimately, again, who go ahead and affect Kiddushin in a bitsina quietly, and therefore, just because you didn't hear about it doesn't mean anything. Seifa, I will say, look at the end of the Brayso. Seifa, Shnaim omrim ra'inuha shenis garsha, u'shnaim omrim lo ra'inuha shenis garsha. Now, I will say, what about the second case? This is Rav Ashi's approach. Rav Ashi says, right, two witnesses say we saw her get divorced, and two witnesses say we did not see her get divorced. What's the halacha? Harezu lo tinase. Ultimately, she shouldn't get remarried. V'nises lo teitzin. I will say again, Rav Ashi switches it. In this case, if she did get remarried, she doesn't have to leave husband number two. And I will say the Gemara says that's pshita, right? So I will say. So remember again, once again. So effectively, what do you have? You have two witnesses saying we saw Reuven give Rachel a get. Two witnesses say, what do they say? We didn't see anything. So the Gemara says, of course, she's divorced. All you have over here really is Eidos saying that Rachel is divorced, that she has a get. So of course, if she got remarried, she doesn't have to leave her second husband. Here we go. Maybe it's the same. Maybe it was like we said before, that maybe the witnesses live in the same, the witnesses who say we didn't see anything, live in the same courtyard as Rachel and Reuven. So they say like this, had there been a get, we would have seen it, or we would have heard about it. The fact that we didn't hear about it means it didn't happen. So the Gemara says, Hainu hach, then it's the same thing as the previous case in the Brayso. Ma'odetema, gabi kiddushin hu da'avidi inshi dimekadshi bitsina. You don't have to like this. Maybe by kiddushin, sometimes it can happen that people do kiddushin under the radar. Aval gabi gerushin im isa de'egarsha kala isla. I will say, but by gerushin, no one gets divorced under the radar. I will say, in fact, again, the whole notion of divorce is designed to create a certain element of publicity to it, so people know that this couple is no longer married. So therefore, if you're living in the same chatra as this couple, and you don't hear anything, maybe that testifies to the fact that they're not really divorced, to which the Gemara says, Kamash malon, Davidi inshi demekadshi, udemegarshi bitsina. Kamash will say, no, that sometimes people get divorced, not only do they do kiddushin quietly, but sometimes even people get divorced quietly as well. And therefore, again, not seeing something, even if you live in direct proximity to the parties, is not a raya that it didn't occur. Pretty incredible. I'll also tell you, if you go back a couple of lines, I was very taken by this line, where Rav Ashi sets this up, and the lashon of the Gemara was, the dari b'chatzar echad. Sometimes you live in proximity to a person. And so, ma'odetema, if you live in proximity to a person, what do you think? Why, right? If this person was really special, dinis kacha, this person had kiddusha in him, kala islay, I know about it. Right? I know this person. Right? And also you could fill in the blank, right? You could be referring to one's spouse, it could be referring to one's child, it could be referring to one's friend. I know this person. And the truth is, they're totally unremarkable. totally unremarkable, nothing special about them. Varaya, if there was something special about them, I would know it. I would know it. If there was Kedusha in them, I would know it because I'm in constant proximity to them. To which the Gemara says, Kamash Malon, da'avdi inshi demekadshi b'tzina. They'll say, meaning what? There are people who amass Kedusha privately. Some people, you can see their Kedusha on their sleeve. And I don't mean in an arrogant way. But some people at the end of the day, you could see that they're halig. You could see that they're special. You could see that they're remarkable. And I will say, some people in this world, they look totally unremarkable. And even worse, they look like they're void of Kedusha. And sometimes we think that we could size people up because, hey, I see this person every day. I know them. I've known them for years. I live in proximity to them, right? I live in the same chutzner. And if they had Kedusha, I would know it. It must be they have nothing. Kamash Malan, the Gemara says, the avdi inchi de mekadshi b'tzina. It will say every single Jew has Kedusha. Every single Jew has Kedusha. Some people have Kedusha b'farhesya, the kind of Kedusha you could see, and some people have Kedusha b'tzina, the type of Kedusha, ultimately, again, that's private. But the Kedusha is always there. And I will say, what a gift the Gemara gives us on Rosh Chodesh Av, where our entire avoda over these 9 days is to work on our bein adam lechavero. And the key to successful bein adam lechavero, interpersonal relationships, is the ability to, if you can't see the Kedusha in your fellow Jew, you have to at least believe that it's there. You know, sometimes I try to see something good in someone and I just can't find it. I'm really looking hard. I can't see any level of Kedusha in a particular person. Even if you can't see it, you have to believe that it's there. But how do you know? Again, Kesuvos Daf Chav Gimel Amud Aleph. Kamash Malon, da'avdi inshi de mekadshi b'tzina. Some people have their Kedusha and it's private. So private that no one else could see it. So private that no one else even knows about it. But you have to believe that within every Jew, it exists. The Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, remember again, the end of the Mishnah was, if ultimately, again, when she gets remarried, Eidim comes, she doesn't have to leave second husband. So the Gemara says, Rabba bar Avid masnila seifa. So we'll say this machlokes. Remember again, when we saw this Mishnah yesterday, there was machlokes. Does this statement go on the Reisha or on the seifa? So we'll say, so again, ultimately, remember again, the Reisha was talking about the case where halacha l'maisa again. She says, I wasn't Eshes ish, but then I got divorced. The Seifa was, I was taken captive, but I wasn't violated. So the Gemara said, listen to this. So man de masnila reisha kol shekena Seifa. So the one who goes ahead and attributes this line to the Reisha will certainly say it works on the Seifa. De b'shvuya hekilu. Because we'll say in general, as we're going to see, in cases of captivity, chazal were mekel. Uman de masnila seifa, but the one who goes ahead and sets it up on the seifa will say first wide line chaf gimel amud aleph. Aval reisha lo will not necessarily set it up on the reisha because l'maisik and we'll say remember again the reisha is talking about remember the case of the reisha was a woman who comes to Beis Din. She says I was married but now I'm divorced. Again pesha hitir. Right, so seifa, I was taken captive, but I wasn't violated. To which the Gemara said, Lema, b'di Rav Hamnuna kameflagi. So I'll say, maybe they're really arguing Rav Hamnuna. I also remember again, Rav Hamnuna, I remember we mentioned before in Chav Beis with Beis just a little while ago, Rav Hamnuna holds that in general, a woman would never be so brazen to say to her husband, you divorced me, right, to his face, if she was not in fact divorced. So the Gemara says, the one who goes ahead and sets up this line of the Mishnah referring to the Reisha holds like Rav Hamnuna, Uman damasnila seifa less Rav Hamnuna. No, the Gemara says, no, not true. Both say everyone agrees to the principle of Rav Hamnuna, that ultimately, again, both say everyone agrees that Allah, a woman would never be so brazen to claim that her husband divorced her in the presence of her husband, if that in fact did not occur. So what are they arguing about? Demar savar ki itmar de Rav Hamnuna befanav, aval shelo befanav mi'iza, umar savar shelo befanav nami eina mi'iza. So we'll say it's actually very interesting. There's machlokes in Rav Hamnuna. Is Rav Hamnuna's statement applied just in the presence of the husband? That we say that like this, a woman would never claim, when standing opposite her husband, she would never claim that he divorced her if he did not divorce her, does that chazaka only apply when she's in the presence of her husband? But if she's not in his presence, she would lie about it? Or though no, even if she's not in his presence, a woman would never make that claim that she is divorced when she's in fact not divorced. That's the source of the machlokes. So the Gemara goes weiter. V'mi sheni says bo edim. Amar Shmuel, Amar Avua de Shmuel. Lo nises mamish. So we'll say, now listen to this. So remember again, we're focusing still on the last line of the Mishnah. The last line of the Mishnah was, V'mi sheni says bo edim. If after she got remarried, edim came, harezu lo teitze. She does not have to leave second husband. Now we'll say, watch this. Comes along Avua de Shmuel and he says like this. Lo nises mamish. It doesn't literally mean if she got remarried. Rather, Ella, kevan shetirua li'inase, afa pisha lo nises. They will say, watch this. This is groundbreaking. Listen to what he says. Avu Lishma says like this. The Mishnah is coming to teach you like this. In any of the aforementioned cases, once a woman has received a heter to remarry, then halacha l'maisa, that heter remains intact even if Eidim come. Wow. So we'll say, I'll just give you a simple application of this. A woman says that halacha l'maisa again, I was married, but now I'm divorced. What's the halacha in such a situation? What's the halacha? Right? Pesha asar pesha hitir. She can go ahead and get remarried. Let's say now, so based in Paskin, now let's say Eidim show up, and Eidim say that what? Rachel's married. Again, that's all they're saying, Rachel's married. So we'll say, so what's the halacha in this case? Essentially, what Avua de Shmuel is saying is, no. Once Beis Din Paskin, essentially Pesha Asar Pesha Hitter, and gave her a license to get remarried, even if witnesses showed up before she got remarried, her original heter remains intact. Incredible. So we'll say, it says the Gemara, Vaha lo teitze katani. But one second, but that's not what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says that ultimately, again, if she got remarried before the witnesses came, lo teitze, which sounds like she actually got remarried and telling us she doesn't have to leave her second husband. To which he says, no, lo teitze mehetera harishon. Wow. What it means is she doesn't have to leave her heter. In other words, once we operate with that pesha asar pesha hitir, Beis Din gave her a license to get remarried. Okay. In other words, even though witnesses now come before she got remarried, halacha l'maisa, she does not leave her heter. Incredible. Tan Rabbanan, I'm supposed to let's back this up. Amran dishbeisi tahorani, v'yesh le'edim shetahorani. So let's say a woman says the following. I was taken captive, but I wasn't violated by my captors. And by the way, I also happen to have edim that I am tahora. So we'll say, what's the halacha? Ein omrim namtin ad sheyaviu edim. We don't say, okay, bring your witnesses. Ella matirin osamiyad. Rather, we allow her to get remarried immediately. I will say, why? In other words, I will say, what is this saying? Here, this woman comes before us, right? She says, I was taken captive, but I wasn't violated, and I also happen to have witnesses to attest to my purity. So I will say, so remember, I have two things happening over here. Based on what she said, could we permit her to go ahead and marry a Kohen? Because that's what's happening over. Could we permit her to marry a Kohen? The answer is yes. Why? Pesha asar pesha hitir. You might have thought, but one second. She's saying she has Eidim. So maybe we shouldn't rely on Pesha asar pesha hitir. Let's wait for the Eidim. Kamash malan, no. If witnesses are in front of us, we'll utilize witnesses. But if they're not here, Pesha asar pesha hitir. Hitiru linase ba'achakak ba Eidim. So I'll say, now watch this. Let's say we permitted to get remarried based on Pesha asar pesha hitir. And now what happens? Witnesses come, and the witnesses say, V'amru lo hiadanu. The witnesses say, I don't know. Right, so she claims Reuven and Shimon know that I wasn't violated. Reuven and Shimon roll into town. They say, Reuven and Shimon, what do you know? And Reuven and Shimon say, we don't know anything. What's the halacha? Harei zolo teitze. Ultimately, again, she does not leave her original state, or she does not leave her original psak. So we pass in pesha asar pesha hitir. That remains. However, v'imbo ede tumo. I feel the yesh lakama bonim teitze. Now I will say the exception to this rule is if witnesses show up and say, no, she was violated, then I will say that changes things. Right? So of course, again, in that situation, you can't ignore the newfound edus. And let's say she had married a Kohen, halacha l'maisa, she would have to leave her husband then after those circumstances. So I will say, listen to this story. Ani shvuyasa de aslin arda. Get ready for this case. Story. There were these group of captives that which came to Narda. Both say Jewish women. Osiv avua de Shmuel niture bahadayu. So let's listen to this. So they're in Narda, and the father of Shmuel, who went ahead and he hired some Jewish men to stand guard over the captive women. So here's the interesting dynamic in this story. These women are obviously being held captive by Gentile captors. So, but yet they're in Narda, where the father of Shmuel has some level of sway. So what does he do? He hires guards to stand guard over these women so that their captors should not violate them. Fascinating. So Amalei Shmuel. So Shmuel said to his father, Ve'ad ha'idna man natrinu. Shmuel says an amazing Gemara. Shmuel says, okay, father, that's fine, but they've been captive for a while already. So presumably, they've already been violated by their captors. If they've already been violated by their captors, what good does it do to set up a guard now? So I'll say, listen to the answer. Amrilei, so Avua de Shmuel says to his son, Ilu bansei chavyon mihavis mizalzel b'hu kulehai. Tell me, if it was your daughter who was captive, right, would you be so flippant about not having the need for the guard? In other words, what Avua de Shmuel was saying was like this. You might be right about what happened in the past, but if we could save them from being violated by their captors now, shouldn't we do that? Which I will say is such a profound yesod. You see, what Shmuel is looking at it as, at the end of the day, what you're doing doesn't affect the reality, right? The halachic reality. And Avua de Shmuel is saying is, just because you can't totally fix something doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to make it a little bit better. I will say, which is such a profound yesod in life. Because so often, this works in both ways for us. Often, we don't take on things if we're not 1,000% sure we could bring it to completion. And often, we're not willing to tackle challenges that I don't know that I could fully fix. And that is a fundamentally flawed approach to life. Because if you don't take on things unless you're absolutely assured of success, you will accomplish absolutely nothing. And if you don't go ahead and try to fix things, even if you're not 100% sure that you could be totally successful, then you'll fix nothing. Life is not about accomplishing things in a perfect way. Life is just about moving the needle a little bit. It's just about fixing things, making things just a little bit better. You can't fix the problem in totality, make it a little bit better. You can't accomplish something in totality, accomplish a little. Because accomplishing something is such a beautiful thing. And that's what's happening over here. Avua de Shmuel is saying to his son, what's the matter with you? What's the matter with you? If we could save these girls one night from being violated by their captors, isn't that I understand, halachic status-wise, it doesn't change anything for them. But these are not halachic objects. These are people. These are people. And if we could do something to ameliorate their suffering right now, maybe it's only for a day, then shouldn't we step in and do it? It's absolutely amazing. To which the Gemara says, so I'll say there's this expression in Chazal and Koheles, that ultimately, which means a mistake that came out from the mouth of the ruler. I will say you'll find this expression in the Gemara. When great people say something, the words of a tzaddik have power. The words of a tzaddik create realities. So Avua de Shmuel says to his son, if your daughter was taken captive, right, would you be so flippant? So his father said it, and what happened? V'shtabyon ban seidimar Shmuel. The daughters of Shmuel were taken captive. Now, I will say, it doesn't mean like that moment, but the daughters of Shmuel tells us something so amazing, right? We're all tzaddikim, and therefore, again, how careful we have to be with our words. The words of a tzaddik create realities. V'askinu la'ardi Yisrael. So I'll say, so Shmuel's daughters were taken captive. Now, in their captivity, they were brought into Eretz Yisrael. Now, I will say, get ready for this story. Ukman l'shvunayhu me'avroi. So as the daughters of Shmuel who are in captivity, they're taken to Eretz Yisrael. They come to the Beis Medrash. They tell the captors, please wait outside. We want to go into the Beis Medrash for just a moment. So what happened? They go into the Beis Medrash of Rabbi Chanina. So listen to this. So there are two daughters. First daughter comes in and she says, I was taken captive, but I was not violated. Second daughter comes in and says, I was taken captive and I wasn't violated. I will say, what's the halacha and such? So now these two girls come into the Beis We'll say, what's the halacha? What's the halacha? Pesha aser, pesha hitir. Right? No one knew about these girls. No one knew about them. So again, they each came in pesha aser, pesha hitir, sharinhu. And therefore, again, they were permitted. So when they permitted, ultimately they can marry a Kohen. Sof, all asu shvunayu. I will say, who walks in after them a little while later? The captors. The captors. Shabbos says this, Amravi Chanina, Benan Demorion Inun. Obviously, again, these are the daughters of a great Talmid Chacham. These are the daughters of a great Talmid Chacham because they understood ultimately, again, how the system worked. So they understood, had they walked into the Beis Medrash with their captors, then at the end of the day, there is a presumption that they were violated. But now that they walked in without their captors, then ultimately, again, the only way we knew about their captivity was through them. Therefore, again, pasha asar, pasha hitir, and therefore they're permitted. Incredible. So, they will say, ultimately, again, it turned out that the matter became known that they were the daughters of Shmuel. So, I just want to point out, we're reading this story. But just understand, we're reading this story on Chodesh Av. And how many stories of Jewish children taken into captivity, right? How much of Klal Yisrael's history, I will say, is filled with stories like this, of children taken from their parents, of girls taken by captors, ultimately led, in this case, they're led to Eretz Yisrael, but led to faraway lands. I will say, we read it like a story in the Gemara. We read it like a story. But I can imagine the pain of Shmuel going through this. Can imagine the pain of the parents of the girls in Narda. I will say, this, so the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, they were the daughters of Shmuel. Amar Rabbi Chanina Rav Shman bar Abba. So Rabbi Chanina said to Rav Shman bar Abba, Puk it bil v'krovosech. So apparently Rav Shman bar Abba is related to Shmuel. So ultimately, Rabbi Chanina says to Rav Shman bar Abba, go and marry these girls. Or one of these girls. You can't marry both of them, right? Go ahead, these are your relatives. Go ahead and marry them. Amar Rabbi Chanina, v'yike edim dinas hayam. But 1 second. These girls were taken captive overseas, right? Shmuel lives in Narda. So in Narda, there are probably Eidim that they were taken captive. And if there are Eidim that were taken captive, then what? Then we have to assume that Allah Lamaisa, they were violated. And then a Kohen would not be able to go ahead and marry them. So in other words, he's saying, I understand in Eretz Yisrael, right now it's Pesha Asa Pesha Hitir, but Pashtos in Narda, there are Eidim. So if they listen to this is incredible. Ashta mias lesnu kama. Rabbi Chanina says that's not how it works with eidos. We don't get into maybe there are eidim somewhere. If there are eidim in front of us, we listen to them. If there are eidim not in front of us, then at the end of the day we cannot incorporate them into the halachic process. So the Gemara says eidim b'tzad astan v'te aser. The expression is there are eidim in the north, and we should go ahead and aser her here. Taima de lo asu eidim. Now the reason ultimately we were not asim is because the eidim did not come. Ha-asu edim mitzvah. But ultimately, I will say, what do you see from here? Sounds like to me that if edim were to show up, then we would answer these girls. But Abu Shmuel said, once we give the heter of Pesha Asra Pesha heter, that's done, and it doesn't change even if edim come. Ravashi Eidei Tuma Itmar. No. You're right. Once we give the heter of Pesha Asra Pesha heter, halacha l'maisa, if witnesses show up about the captivity, we don't listen to those witnesses. But if witnesses show up and say that we know that this girl was violated by her captors, that type of testimony we would not be able to ignore. So therefore I will say, halacha l'maisa, that's how we paskin. That's how the Gemara paskins. That once we give the heter of Pesha Asar Pesha Hitir, at the end of the day, that heter remains. Even if what? Even if Eidim come. Later on, we don't change that heter. Now again, if more significant eidos comes along, like again, a lady says, I was taken captive but I wasn't violated, fine, we let her get married because Peshas or Peshetir. If then later on eidim come along and say she was violated by her captors, that type of eidos we cannot ignore. But I will say, but another incredible yisur comes from this Gemara, which is that what? We don't take into account that there may be eidim somewhere else. As Rabbi was saying, in life, you have to focus on what is in front of you. Right? If a person lives life thinking about every single what if, well, what if this, what if that, this possibility, that possibility, that leads to analysis paralysis. At the end of the day in life, you have to focus on what you have at hand. You have to focus on the information you have in hand. You have to focus on the opportunities that you have in hand and maximize the circumstances that are in front of you. I will say, Amud Beis Mishnah. Shtei nashim shenishbu. 2 women taken captive. Zos omeres nishbeisi tahora ani. This one says, I was taken captive, but I'm tahora. And this one says, I was taken captive, but I'm tahora. Einon ne'emanos. They are not believed. And I will say, Rashi points out to a very important detail that for some reason the Mishnah did not feel the need to include. There's eidos. There's eidos, right? This is talking about a situation where we have eidos to the captivity. Okay. So if there's eidos to the captivity, and there's a presumption that halacha l'maisa, a woman in captivity is violated, then halacha l'maisa, because there's eidos, you can't rely on pesha asar, pesha hitir, and therefore again, they're not believed. Now this is interesting. However, if let's say again it's Rachel and Leah, and Rachel says, Leah was taken captive, but she was not violated. And Leah says Rachel was taken captive, but she was not violated. In that case, halacha l'maisa, they are believed. Then I will say this is going to be because in the case of shvuya is another, captivity is another situation where Chazal were mekel and believed in Eid Echad. So if you could produce an Eid Echad that says you're not violated in captivity, then halacha l'maisa, that is good enough. Says the Gemara Tanah, says go through a bunch of cases. Ani tmeya v'chaverasi tahora. If let's say Rachel says I am tmeya, both of them were taken captive, Rachel and Leah. I am tmeya, meaning I was violated, but Leah was not. Ne'emenes. Rachel is believed. Next case, we're going to go through all of them. Ani tahora v'chaverasi tmeya. I, Rachel, wasn't violated. Leah was. Ino ne'emenes. She's not believed. Ani v'chaverasi tmeya, both I and Leah, both of Rachel and Leah, I and Leah are both tmeya. Ne'emenes al atzma, ve'ino ne'emenes al chaverta. She's believed about herself, not believed about Leah. Ani v'chaverasi tahora, I and Leah are both tahora. Ne'emenes al chaverta, ve'ino ne'emenes al atzma. So Rachel is believed about Leah, not believed for herself. Okay, so we'll say, let's analyze these cases. Omar Mar, Ani tahor v'chaverasi tmeya. So Mar says, in the case where Rachel says, I was not violated, but Leah was, ino ne'emenes. So ultimately, again, Rachel is not believed. So hechi dami, what's the case? Idaleka edim al atzma. If there's no eidos to the captivity for Rachel, then amai lo mehemna. Then why wouldn't Rachel be believed? Right? Nishpei si'u tahora ani ka'amra. Ultimately, say it's a classic case of what? Pesha asar, pesha hitir. Ela pshita di'ika edim. Rather, it must be that we're talking about a case where there are edim. There are witnesses. If that's the case, so we'll say, and therefore again, that's why Rachel is not going to be believed. If that's the case, Ema mitziasa, ani v'chaverasi tmeya, where Rachel says both I and Leah were both violated. Right? We're both tmeya. So ne'emenes al atzma, ve'ino ne'emenes al chaverta. She's believed about herself, but not believed about Leah. But one second. V'idi ika edim, I will say, if there is eidos that they were taken captive, amai lo mehemna, then why would she not be believed for Leah as well? In other words, I will say, the truth is, if there's eidos, we don't even need Rachel's testimony, right? Legabe Leah, because it's assumed that Leah was violated. Elapshita deleka edim. Right? I will say, let's go back. You have to assume that this is a case where there is not eidos. So there's no eidos, Rabbi say, to the fact that Rachel and Leah were taken captive. Okay, so let's analyze this. Ema seifa, ani v'chaverasi tahora. So we'll say, look at the seifa. Rachel says, both I and Leah are tahora. Ne'emenes al chaverta, ve'ina ne'emenes al atzma. She's believed for Leah, but not believed by herself, for herself. But why? V'ida leka edim atzma amai lo mehemna. We'll say again, if it's a case where there's no eidos, then what? Then when Rachel says, both me and Leah are tahora, then what should be the halacha? She should be believed for both of them. Because halacha l'maisa, pesha asar pesha heter for herself, and eid echad for Leah. Okay. Elapshita di'ika edim. Right, we're back. You're right. It has to be a case where there must be eidos. To which the Gemara says, Reisha v'seifa di'ika edim, mitzi asa deleka edim. So you tell me now, that in the Brisa, or in the Mishnah, the Reish and the Seifa is where there are Eidim, and the middle case is where there's no Eidim. Amar Abaye says, yes, Reisha v'Seifa di'ika Eidim, mitziasa deleka Eidim. The Reish and the Seifa do have Eidos, the middle case does not have Eidos. So I will say that's how Abaye understands the Mishnah. So we'll stop over here for today. We'll Emir Hashem pick up with Rav Papa tomorrow about how to understand the various cases. Mishnah Bosai, Shkoyach, Shkoyach. Good Shabbos.